Okay, welcome to LCAP Development Series session number 3. This session is going to focus on revisiting your LCAP to meet local needs. My name's Chip Wilson. I work at Kern County Superintendent of School, along with my co-presenters today, Jonathan Gage and Candy Huizar. So the three of us will be facilitating your time today on this third session. Picture of the team here. We're led by Heather Richter. This whole team works hard to put together the training series for you all. We're going virtual this year, video this year, a little bit different format, just trying to meet everybody's needs. LCAP in the middle of a pandemic can be a bit of a thing, so we've shifted a bit. We're doing these virtual sessions, but this is the team. We are joined today by Max Garris. He's a district fiscal analyst, and he is going to be talking to us about action tables. So glad to have Max with us today. Just kind of a recap on the whole series. As obviously Educating Educational Partners was released, I believe it was January 31st. We did not have a virtual follow-up to that session, but Lily and Michael covered analyzing progress toward the LCAP goals. We sent that video out February 17th, and they held a virtual follow-up workshop on the 22nd. And then today, obviously, we're a day late in getting you this video. We're going to get to you today, March 1st. We've had some technical difficulties. We have a follow-up virtual workshop on March 8th, which is actually a week from today. Excited to bring that to you. And then note that we have an adjustment on the next set here, increasing or improving services. We've shifted the date back a little bit. We're finding that the content is pretty heavy and people are taking their time to process it, which is fine. Again, you're in the middle of a pandemic, and so listen to the feedback. We're going to push that date back a bit so you can see the revised follow-up virtual release date is going to be the 23rd of March for the increasing improving session, and that will be followed up on the 31st of March by the virtual workshop. And then in between there, the budget overview for parents is going to be released on March 17th. So looking forward to bring that to you. Today, obviously, you're into the video. You access the video through the session resources. So this is the same as we've always done, try to provide you with all kinds of goodies, resources, tools. Note here too that we have the document icon. Anytime you see the document icon on a slide, it basically means that the resource on the slide is linked here to this sheet. So just an FYI on that. We are in our virtual session. I'm gonna go back one here. Hold on just a second. So parking lot right here, links to this document. We welcome your questions. At any time as you're watching this video and you don't understand something, feel free to link to this document, ask your question, and we will be responding in real time. So, and then we're going to cover these things when we meet up on the 8th of March. We'll go back through the questions and our responses, and we hope that this is an effective way to answer your questions. We're also, the management analysts are all available for any kind of curriculum questions, and your fiscal analysts are all happy to help you with any kind of fiscal or financial questions regarding the LCAP this year, or anything for that matter. Lessons learned. We are always learning here at the county office, trying to follow the CDE. This little guy with the magnifying glass, you're going to see him highlighted throughout our whole series. It just basically means that we learned a lesson here, or we're trying to focus or emphasize something for you. Our intent is to help you to be as transparent as possible, both to help the reviewer ensure that your LCAP is meeting statutory requirements, but also to help you avoid unnecessary negative attention from advocacy groups. We want to be as efficient as possible with you to get this to your board and have as few adjustments, corrections as needed. So the lesson learned is kind of an emphasis point within the slide deck. Okay, today's objective, pretty simple. We're gonna share guidance on the different possible ways you could revise your metrics, goals, and actions based on your LEA's local needs. Like I said, everybody's coming out of a pandemic. Everybody's needs are different and they're great. We know that. And we want you to be able to share your story here within this LCAP. There's a lot of flexibility to it this year. We want to make sure you can take advantage of flexibility to continue to be, to create equitable conditions and transparency with your process. Which brings me to the next slide, which is all about just kind of the continuous improvement framework that we believe in, that the LCAP is founded upon. Three major categories here, or portions. You've got equity, you've got transparency, you've got local control. Our hope as we go through the content, we want to encourage, you to look at the equity aspects of your LCAP and the transparency aspects, and take advantage of those two elements to really move your LCAP forward. And of course, everything's based on local control. So we want to meet your needs. You need to meet your needs. So this LCAP is a good vehicle to do that. Overview of the LCAP elements, pretty simple this year. The budget overview for parents, again, is going to be a part of the LCAP. This year, only this year, hopefully, the supplement to the annual update that you just got done with will be a part of the LCAP when you turn it in. So you go budget overview for parents will be on top. Supplement to the annual update, just the template is next. Then you've got the LCAP template and the action tables. Max is going to talk about those today. And then the instructions. So that's the package for you for LCAP for this year. Real quick, our session today is, again, going to be on metrics, goals, and actions. Here are just some screenshots of what that looks like. You notice there's an icon there right here on the bottom left. This links to the template, the LCAP template that I'm sure that you all already have. It's been linked in every training we've done so far. It's the same template, it's not different. They haven't changed it yet. So for this year, it's good to go, but it is linked in our resource section. This next slide was shared with you by Lily and Michael last session. And really, this is a great slide. It's a great model for continuous improvement that we'd like for you to keep in mind as you're considering the goal analysis process you just went through. You're going to take that information and you're going to apply it today, or not today, but next. And we're going to cover that in this session. 3 questions regarding improvement. What specifically are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that it changes an improvement? And what changes might we introduce and why? All these 3 questions are answered in your LCAP. So your goals typically are what you're trying to accomplish. How will you know it changes an improvement? You're going to be looking at your metrics. That's really your kind of your guardrails, your guiding points. You're going to course correct as you need to. We're going to show you some flexibility in those metrics today. And then what changes might we introduce and why? And that's going to come more in the actions. Like, you're living this now, it's kind of chaotic. You're going to be able to tell your story in a hopefully a linear fashion that talks about, well, maybe this metric wasn't going well and we decided to make a change with an action. We adjusted an action, took an action away, added an action, whatever it may be. And really the plan, do, study, act cycle there on the bottom, this is really all that's working in the LCAP, right? That's those actions interacting with the metrics, which interact with the priorities and your goals. So it all kind of comes together. We felt like this was a really good slide to go back over. Again, I'll reiterate, the fact is that you may want to adjust some goals. You may want to add a focus goal here. So you can see we've got categories. So you could, through your analysis, you're going to look at any adjustments you may want to make to a goal, any adjustments you may want to make to your metrics, including possibly, if you're just showing all students and not student groups, you're not really highlighting the gaps that we need to close as a county, as a state. that's your equity piece right there. So we're going to encourage you about, enhancing your metrics a little bit. Actions, again, it depends on your metrics, depends on how things are going. What are you going to do with your actions? All this to say we are trying to operationalize equity. Improved outcomes for all kids is what we're going after, especially our unduplicated students, which obviously are English learners, low-income foster and homeless youth. They're high-needs students. They need more help. But our objective is to help all kids. Okay. Again, Lily and Michael, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but the 21-22 goal analysis piece that they went through last session really gets applied here in your goals, the arrow to the goals, to the metrics and reporting results and the actions for today. So I'm going to actually get into the first piece here. I'm going to be followed by Jonathan and Candy and Max. And I'm going to talk about measuring and reporting outcomes, tracking your progress, kind of seeing what kind of course corrections you may need to make. Without looking at your metrics, you're not able to tell how things are going. So obviously looking at the data, looking at the metrics is going to be really important. Today, I am focusing just in this middle part here. So the measuring and reporting results. And I kind of have a little more of a close up here. So you have your metric, your baseline, those are done. Years 1, 2, and 3, though, that's where you are measuring progress. And then your desired outcome for year 3 is your goal, essentially. And when I hit this here, really years 1, 2, and 3 are about closing those gaps. And really the only way to close the gaps is to know where all students are and where your different student groups are that are in need. So again, metrics are really important. This year we are focusing on just the year 1 outcome. Next year will be year 2, and then the final year of the LCAP will be obviously year 3 in 23-24. Let's see. So the first point I want to make regarding this little magnifying glass guy is that we have noticed over the course of the past couple of years in working with the template that readers are much more the ability to be transparent and for readers to read the LCAP well, the metric section well, it really needs to be aligned. So I'm talking row by row here. So notice that 1A in this picture is in one box, one row. So you've got 1A metric, 1A baseline, and then the desired outcome. And obviously you're going to be filling in the year 1 outcome this year. Take a look at the next one, 1B, nice and right across, well organized. 1C, again, from left to right, easy to read, simple. I'm going to show you a non-example. So I guess the little magnifying glass guy is there to say that we've noticed that being intentional about aligning your metrics really does make a huge difference, as opposed to just putting all 3 of these metrics in one row. There are 3 rows for 3 metrics. Let me show you the next slide here. Okay, this example. So you've got priority 1A, and then you can see, so they're all in one row. Okay, so 1A, 1B, 1C, but I'm going through 1A right now. So 1A metric, 1A baseline, and then your desired outcome for 1A is on the far right. Notice how 1B kind of bounces around. It goes up here and down, back down for desired outcomes. Much not as easy to read, much harder to read, right? 1C, oh my. So you can see it makes a difference, and then they're already in a priority 2. Again, the magnifying glass guy calls out some things we've realized and noticed. It's not approvability. It is just readability. It is being kind to stakeholders or to educational partners to make sure that everybody can read and understand your metrics quickly and easily. All right, I'm going to get into some scenarios with you right now about metrics. So common scenarios that you might encounter when updating your LCAP this year. 5 specific concepts. So baseline being incorrect, desired outcomes needing to be revised, year 1 outcome not available, which is going to be the case for some of you for sure. New metric needs to be added. I've got 2 examples there, and then 1 more for existing metric needs to be removed. All right, my first one, Actually, my first two are going to focus on the A through G completion rate. So you can see the metric here and the baseline. And in this scenario, the A through G rate initially was reported as at 10%. The actual corrected rate was 40%. Suggested solution here is just to list and annotate both the initial and corrected rates for transparency. So you can see adjustments made due to reporting error. It's that simple. You just correct it, and you can't get rid of that initial baseline because it tells the story, right? You would for sure want to mention this in prompt 4, that goal analysis section. So how you changed that. Again, transparency, equity, local control are the focus here. Next up, revising a desired outcome. So remember, that's the one on the far right, and it can most certainly be revised. We're suggesting that you keep the original there, and you adjust the desired, and that, again, that tells the story. These are things that are really important to make sure that you note, and again, it goes to your story. This case, again, A through G, the fact that the desired outcome had changed meant, or sorry, the baseline changed meant that the desired outcome needed to change. That makes sense. Again, make sure you go and cover it in prompt 4 of your goal analysis section just to explain the change. Next up, year 1 outcome not available. So great example here with CASP was not administered, say, that whole viability issue that came up last year. Many of you gave STAR, Renaissance STAR. Some did other local assessments, but so CASP was not administered. You have, this is 4A, no academic indicator on the dashboard. Obviously, there's no color on the dashboard. Using and let's just say you, like I said, you use those local assessments. You can see what they did here. They just explained was not fully administered in 2021. Many of your cases, it just wasn't administered because it wasn't viable. And you can say, see local metric, whatever. You may add that one in this year. That's fine. Again, you just want to explain. So let's see. Yeah, and then I kind of covered the suggested solution there. New metric needs to be added. So if you're going to add a new metric, you most certainly can. It can be, if this is the first year of the data, pay attention here. So you want to use the most recent data as baseline. So in this case, if you're adding it this year, you just wouldn't have a year 1 outcome because this technically would become your baseline year, right? And then your 2 outcome would be for next year and then the following year. And of course, you'd want to put your desired outcome in based on your baseline from this year. And again, as always, make sure you're mentioning this in prompt 4 of your goal analysis section that Lily and Michael covered last session. One more on this new metric needs to be added. This is actually an example that Lily and Michael used last session about somebody's LCAP goal 4 here that involved in improving academic and language proficiency for English learners. Here are the accompanying actions. The metrics that this district had chose to use was local LEA assessments, such as iReady, quarterly grades, and LPAC results. And new metric added here would be the CASP. So to have this district as an example decided that they wanted to go more than just local assessments. They wanted to look at CASP results, which is always good to have multi-levels of data, and maybe look at all students versus ELs to see if we're closing that gap. Like I said, do that comparison. And then this is, obviously a lot of you didn't give CASP last year. This is just an example for how you can enhance, say, even an action to do some better course correction as needed. Just more information. My last scenario for you, existing metric needs to be removed. So actions are removed, programs could be ended. A lot of plans out there right now. So if you do decide to move a metric or an action, in this case, I'm talking metric, you just report out year 1 outcome. You can see % of teachers completing full course training for TC or WP. There's a baseline, year 1, and then you're basically going to shut it down. You're going to say NA for the next 2 years, and then you can say your desired outcome was retired for whatever reasons. And that's basically what this says, along with making sure that it's covered in prompt 4 of your goal analysis section. So those are your scenarios. We management analysts are available too, to help you to talk through any changes you want to make. The bottom line is you can make changes, and you need to make the changes you need to make because it's all about local control. So we want to help you. So those are just some examples. One of my last 2 slides here, in your session resources, you have links to the whole child piece here. This is a part of this is a resource map that's on the CDE website on the right, and I'll go to the left. This is our standard document that talks about the LCAP metrics and outcomes. We continue to update this just with ideas for how you can go find the metrics. They're the same they've always been, but like I said, we try to keep supporting you with additional ways to find the information. Both of these are linked in the resource document. And finally, I wanted to bring up that on March 8th, Greg West will be here with us for the live session. We're going to use the current integrated data system to dig into some of these metrics. Really interesting, a lot of new opportunity. KIDS has grown immensely. This that I show you on the screen here are STAR Math, the unified scale scores. We're comparing all students to, in this case, SED and EL students. Just the power of this and how you can incorporate it into your LCAP. He's going to start digging and show you some ways to use KIDS. My big thing with this slide here is just we need to dig deeper in order to create more equitable outcomes for kids. If we're digging deeper, your audience is going to understand your situation better. You guys have been under so much pressure, and we're seeing a lot of baseline scores from last year. Year 1 may be not quite at the baseline, and that's reality. So you're doing the best you can. You guys are doing a great job. We're here to support you 1,000%, and we're excited to bring Greg West and KIDS on during our live session on March 8th. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan Gage. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a little bit of context and overview for the goals and actions section. Really, the purpose of the goals and actions section is to clearly communicate to your educational partners. In doing so, you're going to communicate what the LEA plans to accomplish, so the goals, why the LEA plans to accomplish this, the why, how the LEA plans to accomplish this through your actions, and how the LEA knows when it has accomplished this goal through the measures of progress, and also what fiscal resources are being used to support the goal, the action tables. So once again, like we talked about, transparency. So clearly communicating with your educational partners to make sure that you're providing transparency. And by doing it clearly, really speaks to the equity of your LCAP plan. So I really like this quote by Albert Einstein: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So just once again, making sure that it is put in terms that your educational partners and your parents can actually understand. So requirement for goals and actions, we want to make sure that the LCAP must include a description of those annual goals to be achieved for each student group, for each state priority, and for any local priorities identified by the local governing body. Also, the LCAP must include an annual review of the effectiveness of the goals, actions, services from the prior year, which Lily and Michael went over recently. Now let's talk about goals, addressing those varying needs through different goals. So in the template for goals, metrics, and actions, we're going to focus on this first piece right here, the goal description and why for each type of goal. So some considerations here is to make sure that goals address each of the state priorities and any local priorities. However, one of those lessons learned here is to make sure that we know that one goal can actually address multiple priorities. Also, a goal may focus on the performance of all students, one or more specific groups, narrowing performance gap, or the implementation of certain programs and strategies to improve student outcomes. Also, an LEA may identify that a goal is applicable only to a certain school site or particular student groups. Some other considerations for your goals is making sure that the goal is aligned with your identified needs in the plan summary reflections. So those identified needs and or the engaging educational partners section of the LCAP. We also want to make sure that the measures of progress and actions are aligned to what the LEA plans to accomplish. So I know you have your goals set that you're working on, so I'll just be real brief about each of these. There are 4 types of goals this year. There's a broad, focus, maintenance of progress goal, and then there is a new required goal for certain LEAs with that have low performing student groups or low performing schools that were identified. This little icon here shows us that there is a link to those low performing student groups and low performing school list on our resource document. So talking about goal descriptions, for broad goals, you'll want to describe what the LEA plans to achieve through the actions included in that goal. Now your focus goal is a little bit more specific, measurable, and time bound. Your maintenance of progress goal, you're going to want to describe how the LEA intends to maintain the progress made towards LCFF state priorities that are not listed in other goals in the LCAP. For your required goal, you're going to want to make sure that you're addressing those low performing student groups or the low performing schools. Now, your management analyst has already reached out to you if you have a required goal for your LCAP. Now let's just talk about a little bit of some examples here. So these are some simple examples to kind of just show you the difference between a focused, a broad, and a maintenance goal here. So just if you quickly look over it, you can see a focus goal, like I said, is a little bit more specific. It has those student groups in it. It has the numerics in it that's measurable, increasing that attendance rate to 93% by a certain date and time. Your broad goal is more wide sweeping, implementing systems and structures to improve student engagement for all students. And then your maintenance goal is maintaining those systems and structures for continued student engagement. Now, a little bit more specific about what a goal might look like. So the goals that we just went over were each an engagement type goal. Right here, we have some examples of what a focus, broad, and maintenance goal would look like with a little bit more detail and specificity. So if you want to, you can come back to this slide and pause it and read through these and get a little bit more detail on what we would consider a well-written goal. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the whys for each goal. This is an area that the team has learned a little bit more about as we moved on. And there was some mismatch in the actions and the measurements for each goal. So we want to make sure that we are aligning the whys for each goal and goal type. So for a broad goal, why the goal was developed. We want to make sure that in the why section, our educational partners clearly understand and it's transparent to them why the goal was developed, and also how the actions and metrics grouped together will help the district achieve that broad goal. Now, for our focus goal, we want to make sure that we're communicating why this goal was prioritized specifically. Also, that it needs to be based on data, so either a dashboard or the local data that we have. And then also how the LEA identified this goal, including through consultation with their educational partners. Now, for our maintenance of progress goal, under the why, we want to list how the actions will sustain the progress exemplified by the related metrics. Then lastly, on our required goal for our why section, we want to make sure that we have the why the goal is required, including any student groups that led to that requirement, and then also how actions metrics differ from previous efforts to improve outcomes and why they are believed to help achieve such outcome. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of an example, so revising the why explanation of the goal. So let you take just a few seconds, read that goal description, focused on grade level mastery and academic performance. And then the why here. And the one thing I wanted to point out in this example, or the explanation of the why, is just this piece right here where the recognition of specific needs of student groups not yet achieving at or above standard. So just really remembering in the instructions, we're explaining why the LE developed the goal and how the actions and metrics grouped together will help achieve this goal. So really, when we talk about specific groups not achieving, it would really be nice to kind of break that down and get a little bit more information in regards to which student groups and where are they at. So to give you kind of an example of this same goal updated with a little bit more specific information, a little bit more detailed for the reader, you can see adding those student groups in there. Also the point difference, 1.6 points respectively, and then kind of where they're at status wise. In addition, that feedback from educational partners is key and listed in here in the why, along with other ways to increase academic support for these students. And now I'm going to turn it over to Candy to talk about actions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we're going to be talking about actions in your LCAP. And remember, the actions really tell us how we plan to achieve our goal. So before we begin, we want to take you back to the goal analysis that was covered during our last session in this development series. So we want you to really have this goal analysis in the forefront as you are looking at what actions you will be implementing for this year's LCAP. For example, if we had actions that through the analysis we determined were being successful, we might ask ourselves, how might we continue and strengthen those actions and maybe expand upon what's working? If we have actions that maybe were not as effective, then maybe we might look at how we can revise them to make them more effective. Also, if you recall from the goal analysis, we also looked at some carryover dollars. What carryover funds are you going to have rolling into this LCAP, and how might you either expand upon some actions with increased funding, or maybe develop some new actions with the use of those funds? And as Chip mentioned, really the goal of this LCAP is to improve equity for your students. And how you do that is really through your actions. Remember, your actions are the supports, the services that you are going to be providing to your students through your LCAP dollars. So really, this is a great opportunity for you to develop actions that are meeting this intended need. And also keep in mind that those actions then feed into your increase and improve services section, which is really how we're showing and demonstrating that we are meeting the intent of LCFF funds, which is really to improve outcomes for our unduplicated students. So here's a tool that you might use as you're looking to make your actions more equitable for all. This tool comes from San Diego County Office of Education, and you can see that we have linked it to the resource document for this session. So let's suppose that during your goal analysis, one of the areas that you were struggling in was around school climate. So you would use this tool, you'd click on Priority 6 for school climate, and you see that it's going to give you some ideas on how you might produce more equitable outcomes for students for this priority area. So this would be a great tool for you to use as with your teams as you're looking to operationalize equity. This is just a quick preview of this tool. We plan on going in depth during our upcoming workshop, but we did want to share this with you and highlight how you might be able to use this tool as you are revising your actions. So let's do a quick reminder of the action tables. One thing I do want to point out here is the action table section of the template has not changed. So all of this is the same as it was the previous year. So I just want to do a quick reminder. Remember, in that very first column, you're going to put the number of your action. Next, you're going to add a title, a short title for your action. Remember, this title will also appear on the action tables. Then you are going to provide a description for your action. And really, this is where the bulk of our time today is going to be around the description section of the table. Next, you will add the total funds for this action. And last but not least, you're going to determine whether this action is contributing or not by marking yes or no. So I do want to point out this section specifically. This is really important. And making that determination whether the action is contributing or not is an area that our folks tend to struggle with. So as you are determining whether this action is contributing or not, you have to really ask yourself, is this action improving and increasing services for our unduplicated students? So to do that, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. First, you're going to ask yourself, is this action addressing an identified need for unduplicated students? Next, you're going to ask yourself, are my unduplicated students going to benefit to a greater extent from this action when compared to all students? And last of all, you're going to ask yourself, is this action being funded with S&C dollars? If you can respond yes to all 3 of those questions, then you would say, yes, this action meets the requirement for a contributing action. Remember, only the actions that are marked yes as contributing will be counted towards meeting your MPP. So let's talk about how we might revise actions based on need. So here we have an example that was shared with you previously during the workshop with Michael and Lily on the goal analysis section. So we have it's goal number 4, which is to improve academic and language proficiency for English learners. And then you're going to see this description. We know that this action is around a homework after school homework support program. It's being provided at every campus and facilitated by a teacher. So if you recall from the workshop, as we did the analysis for this action, we were able to collect some data. One thing I want to point out is that when asked, parents reported that transportation was a barrier that prevented their students from attending every day. When we looked at the overall implementation, we saw that this action was fully implemented at all school sites, but not all the students that we had meant to target were attending regularly. We had some successes. We had students who attended regularly. They did show some improvement in their grades. And we did know it was more successful at some sites than in others. Some challenges that came out of this analysis was that transportation was a barrier, and that some students were feeling that this was maybe this program was more of a punishment as opposed to an opportunity. So based on that analysis, here is just one way that we might revise this action. We saw that transportation was a big concern. So you can see that to strengthen this action, we have added a new component, which is to increase the number of students who are participating in this after-school homework support. We're going to add a late bus route. You're going to see that in addition to adding that to the description, we also increase the funds to show that we are going to be providing that additional service to this action. So you might ask yourself, how else could I revise this action based on need? Well, we might look at other ways, maybe messaging the intent of this program, maybe how we might include some incentives for our students so that they really see this as an opportunity and not something that's punitive. So that's just one example on how you can revise existing actions based on the analysis that was previously done. So now let's talk about some lessons learned. You can see we have our little guy here showing us that this was something that we learned from last year's LCAP season. So one thing that came up was how we develop clear actions. So you can see we have a new example here. And in this example, we're talking about intervention programs. This description says students who are struggling and performing below standard will be identified for math and reading intervention services, including online platforms and after-school programs. One of the things that you're going to see here, and what we often saw during last year's LCAP, was that it wasn't really clear what was being funded. You see, we have $170,000 allocated, but it's not really clear what those funds are being paid for and what is the intent of this action. So we want to ask ourselves, does this action clearly articulate how and what something is going to be done? Is the action clear? Is it well written so that it is clear and comprehensible? And we might ask ourselves these questions. And remember, we shared this during last year's LCAP series, making sure our actions answer who, does what, for whom, and what is the intended outcome. So now let's talk about how we might rewrite this action to make it more clear. So you'll see on this slide, we still have the same action. Funds have not changed. The only thing that has changed is now we have added some more language to the description to make it more clear. Now you'll see in bold, we added 3 part-time intervention specialists will be facilitating the after-school program. We have the intent. The intent is to increase student achievement in ELA and math. We know we're going to be providing supplemental resources, and we're going to be allocating funds for stipends for instructional aides to support during after-school hours. So you can see how we were able to add some language just to make it really clear. Now, when we look at the funds being allocated, we have much more clarity as to what exactly is being funded. Another lesson learned is around bundling actions. So what is bundled actions? Bundling is when a district lumps different items together into a single action. And this was a big takeaway for us during last year's LCAP cycle. So let's talk about bundling. We know bundling is great if you're trying to save money by bundling your car and home insurance, but bundling is not such a great idea when we're talking about LCAP actions. And let's talk a little bit about why that's probably not the best idea. So we do want to begin with sharing that there are some instances where bundling would be appropriate. So let's look at this first example. We have one action that encompasses textbooks, computer-based instructional materials, and lab equipment. You'll see in this example, all of the items are being funded with the same funding stream, which in this case would be base funding, because they would all be non-contributing. You'll see that they're going to be provided to the same target audience, which is all students. And it's going to be, the scope is going to be the same. It's going to be provided district-wide. Another action where this would be permissible is if we have an action that encompasses EL tutors, EL supplemental curriculum, and professional development to meet the needs of our EL students. In this case, this would be permissible because you're going to see that all the funds are being funded, all the actions are being funded out of contributing dollars, S&C funds. You're going to see that they're all directed towards the same student group, which in this case is English learners. And once again, these will be provided to the same scope, which would be district-wide. So let's talk about when bundling is not permissible. So an example of a permissible bundling of an action would be if we had textbooks, college counselors, AP exams, library aids for elementary schools, and EL language interventions. So why would this not be allowable? Well, first of all, you can see that we have items here, which would be funded out of non-contributing dollars, which would be your base. For example, your textbooks and maybe your library aids. And then you have some items that would be contributing, such as your EL language interventions. You're also going to see that the target audience is different within these specific items. For example, some are funded specifically toward EL, like our language intervention, and some are targeting all students. For example, our textbooks and our library aids. You see that the scope is different. Some of these are being provided just to high schools. Some of them are being provided just to elementary schools. And last but not least, you're going to notice that these are not aligned to the same metric. The way that you would be evaluating the effectiveness of your college counselors would be very different from how you're evaluating the effectiveness of your EL interventions. How might we fix this? Well, one easy way would be to separate this into different actions. So you can see we have one action, which is around textbooks. Second action would be around college counselors and AP exams. Third action would be library aids, and then action 4 would be those EL interventions. So why does this matter? Well, first of all, when we have too many items grouped into one action, it really makes it hard to be able to discern how much the district is spending on each one of those items. It also makes it much more difficult to assess the effectiveness of each one of those expenditures because we are looking at actions that may have different metrics associated with them. It also allows us to mix base and S&C funding in a way that really ends up being counterproductive to the overall process. This was an area that we really learned a lot from last year, where we would have our districts sometimes bundle non-contributing items with contributing items. And then it became really difficult to see what was actually contributing and actually counting that correct amount towards your MPP. And so what we ended up having to do is have districts go back and either unbundle those actions, or they would have to go and add additional language to make it really clear what was being funded with what funds. And last but not least, when we bundle, it really makes it hard to remain transparent. And as we know, transparency for your educational partners is one of the goals of your LCAP. So before we move on to action tables, I have a couple of reminders for you. The first is that you are required, if you are an LEA that has a numerically significant EL population, meaning you have an EL population of 30 students or more, you are required to develop an action that is specifically addressing your EL students. That action at a minimum needs to address language acquisition, and it needs to address professional development activities specific to your ELs. That can be done through multiple actions, through one action where you're addressing both, but you need to make sure that you are at least at a minimum addressing those two areas. You are also encouraged but not required to develop an action for your foster youth if you have a numerically significant population of 15 or more foster students. With these actions, you can develop an action that is designed to meet the needs of your foster youth students. I just want to clarify, you are required, if you have 30 or more ELs, to write an action for your ELs. If you have 15 or more foster youth, you are encouraged but not required to develop an action that addresses their specific needs. And we know that we oftentimes just want to look at some sample language. So just a reminder before we close, really thinking about developing our descriptions based on this frame. Who does what for whom, and what is the intended outcome? You can see in this specific sample, we have the who, which is our full-time counselor. What is that counselor going to do? They're going to provide counseling for who? For students. And what's the intended outcome? Meeting their students' social emotional needs. So making sure it's really clear what is being funded, what's the intent of the action is really the best recommendation that we can make as you're looking to revise your actions for this year. And with that, I will turn it over to Max, who's going to talk to you about the action tables.
Thank you, Candy. My name is Max Garris. I'm one of the fiscal analysts here at the county office, and today I'll be going over action tables, which are the total plan expenditure table and the contributing actions table. And I will be covering both the LCAP template, which is provided by the CDE on their website, and I'll also cover a little bit later the DTS tables and how those work. As far as the LCAP template, they're comprised of 3 different sections. The first one is the data entry table. This is where you'll pretty much put in all of your information for the year. And then that'll feed into the total planned expenditure tables and then the contributing action tables. Also included are the 21-22 annual update table, 21-22 contributing actions annual update table, and then the LCFF carryover table. And these were all covered in our last session by Jonathan. The LCAP template, you will actually be submitting 2 separate worksheets for these, one for the current year, 21-22, which Jonathan covered last time. And then the second one, which I'm going to cover today, includes the total planned expenditure table and the contributing action table. Now, to get started on these, you start at the data entry tab. You can see it's all the way to the left. This is where you're going to put in all your information for the year. Just looking at the first box, this is your projected LCFF base grant amount. And you will get this amount from your May revise LCFF calculator. So once that becomes available, you'll take that information and you'll input it here. And the same thing with the box next to it is your projected supplemental and concentration amount. And again, you'll just pull this straight off of your LCFF calculator and input it here. Now this, the one the third box, this will calculate your percentage of your improved increase in improved services. And then your LCFF carryover percentage. This is the amount that Jonathan went over last time. And you'll get this from your 21-22 carryover table that you complete. And you'll just add it right there, and then it'll calculate a new total percentage. And then on this bottom section of the data entry tab, this is where you put in all of your goals and actions, the titles, the student groups it serves, whether it's contributing or not contributing, and just all of that information in addition to the funds and the fund sources, and that'll calculate all the way over to get a total fund amount. So this is pretty much the meat of the process here. You want to make sure everything in here is correct and is as accurate as possible. And then you go over to the next table, which is the total expenditure table. And all of this data is pulled directly from the data entry table. So you'll just want to go in here and just double check a couple things to make sure your LCFF funds are correct, your actions and title or goals and actions are correct, and your amounts are correct. And then from there, you'll go to your contributing action table. Same thing here. Everything gets pulled over from the data entry table. So you just want to look at it, make sure everything looks correct. There's no issues with the formulas or anything like that. And this is your contributing action table. And you'll notice here on the second action here, it says contributing, it says no. So there is no amount over here because this table is only for contributing action tables. And then that's pretty much it on the LCAP template. Now, as far as DTS action tables, they're more or less the same thing, but they're just arranged a little bit differently. There's no data entry table. The total planned expenditure tables doesn't have the word planned in it, and the contributing action tables doesn't have the word actions in it. We talked to DTS last week, and they said they're still finalizing the final version of DTS, so they may or may not change the wording of it. I just wanted to highlight that just in case they don't change it, and I didn't want there to be any confusion. So on the DTS tables, you'll go to the table contents here, and you'll select goals and actions to get started. And then I'm sure all of you have seen this before. Chip covered a little bit earlier today in this presentation, where you input your metrics, your baseline, and just all your information for your goals and actions. And then from here, if you scroll down a little bit further on this page, you will come to this section here. And this is the fiscal section here, where this is where you will put in your amounts, whether it's non-personnel or personnel. You'll put in the amounts here, and then as you can see, it totals up to what the total is, and that's your total amount for that goal action. And then on the population served, I'm going to turn this over to Candy, just so she can explain a little bit better on how to populate this area here. Thank you, Candy. And again, the amounts you put in here, and it just totals and it creates a total over here. And then from here, once you've done that for all your goals and actions, you go to your total expenditure tables. And this is what it looks like here. You can see everything is pre-populated. It's from your goals and actions section of the information you just input it, and the amounts will get put in here and just get carried over. And then for the contributing expenditure tables, exact same thing. Everything will just be pulled from there, and only your contributing actions amounts will show up here. And then that's pretty much it for the action tables on both the DTS side and the LCAP template side. There's not a whole lot to it. Just to make sure that the entry you put in there, whether it's your data entry table or on the DTS side of things, just to make sure it's as accurate as possible when it's put in. And just some key takeaways here. You just want to make sure that your base amount and your supplemental concentration grant amounts are included in the contributing action tables. And you want to make sure that planned expenditures and funding sources are carried over verbatim from your 21-22 LCAP. Also on the contributing action tables, make sure planned contributing expenses are greater than or equal to the district's supplemental concentration amount, because you remember that's the amount that is the minimum amount that needs to be spent for increased improved services. And then ensure only actions that contribute to increased improved services are included. And as always, we're here as a resource. So if you have any questions or just want to go over anything that you did or just get a review of something, feel free to reach out to your fiscal analyst and we will be more than happy to help you with anything. Thank you. And now I will send it back to Candy just for some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Max. And before we close for today, we just want to remind you that we highly encourage you to add any questions that you might have to the virtual parking lot. We will be responding to those questions directly on this sheet so that everybody can see what responses we have to those questions. And we will also be covering these questions during our upcoming workshop. So we want to give you a reminder that follow-up workshop will be on March 8th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. During this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to be doing the Q&A from the parking lot. We're also going to be sharing some other resources and tools on how you might revise and improve your LCAP, actions, goals, and metrics. And then we're also going to give you some time to collaborate with other participants. And then I do want to point out that our next video for increase and improve service section, as we mentioned earlier, the date has changed. That date will now be released on March 23rd. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more time to make sure that you've gotten caught up on all of the previous recordings, because we know that you guys have been very busy. And with that, I want to thank you on behalf of all of our team. Thank you for your time. As always, you know, we are here, as well as your fiscal partners. We are here to support you through this process. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can support you with. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.